the stranger's smile. Pain came first, sharp, cutting, as if someone was driving nails into her skull. Then came the smell, harsh hospital antiseptic mixed with the scent of wilted flowers on the windowsill. Only then did the sounds register. The steady beeping of machines, the rustle of scrubs, distant voices in the corridor. The woman opened her eyes and saw a white ceiling with a yellowish stain from an old leak. Light from the window cut through her vision, making her squint. She tried to turn her head and groaned as a new wave of pain crashed over her. A nurse, a plump, middle-aged woman with a kind face, noticed the patient had awakened and hurried to the bedside. She was saying something, but the words reached her as if through cotton. The woman tried to respond, but only a croak emerged from her throat. The nurse gently lifted her head and brought a cup of water to her lips. The liquid burned her parched throat, but brought relief. Gradually, the world began to come into focus. A hospital room, an IV in her arm, bandages on her head, and absolute, terrifying emptiness in her consciousness where memory should have been. The woman tried to remember anything. Her name, the face of someone close, the house where she lived. But in her mind was only a black hole, as if someone had erased her entire life with an eraser. A doctor, a tired man with graying temples, explained that she'd been brought in 3 days ago after a car accident. Severe concussion had caused retrograde amnesia. Memory might return in days, weeks, months, or might never return at all. No documents had been found with the woman. The car had been rented with fake papers. No purse, no phone, not the slightest clue that could help establish her identity. The woman was nobody, a blank space, a person without a past. But somewhere deep inside, something was screaming, beating against the walls of oblivion, demanding she remember something vitally important, something connected to children's laughter and small hands, something on which someone's life depended. Detective Sarah Connolly arrived at the hospital the next day. 20 years on the force had taught her to read between the lines, and what she saw in the medical charts made her heart clench. The woman's body told a story of long, methodical violence. Old rib fractures that had healed improperly. Cigarette burn scars on her shoulder blades. Marks on her back from strikes with a thin object, possibly a cane or whip. All these traces had been inflicted in places that clothing would hide. Someone had spent years turning this woman into a victim, carefully concealing the evidence of torture from prying eyes. Yet the woman clearly belonged to high society. Hands without a single callus, professional manicure, expensive haircut, evidence of recent cosmetic treatments. The clothes she'd been found in were from well-known European designers. Detective Connolly sat beside the bed and carefully studied the patient's face. Beautiful, noble, despite the bruises and cuts from the accident. And her smile, so perfect it caught even a non-professional's eye. The nurse noticed the detective's interest in the patient's teeth and quietly mentioned that she'd never seen such a flawless smile, even on Hollywood actresses. The work had been done at the highest level and probably cost a fortune. Dr. Michael Stone, the hospital's chief dentist, spent a long time studying the X-rays of the unknown patient. What he saw made him whistle in amazement. 18 veneers made of high-quality ceramic, each crafted individually with jeweler's precision. Work of this caliber required months of labor and cost no less than $80,000. Only a few masters in the world were capable of such perfection. But most importantly, under powerful magnification, Dr. Stone noticed a microscopic engraving on one of the veneers. Tiny symbols, barely visible even with a professional loupe. He photographed the marking and sent the images to Detective Connolly. The detective began her own investigation of this mysterious signature. Consultations with the country's leading dentists, requests to international medical organizations, database searches. All this took several days of intensive work. Finally, a specialist from Johns Hopkins University identified the marking. Only one person in the world used such a signature. Dr. Ahmed Al-Zarqawi, owner of an elite dental clinic in Dubai. His patients were exclusively representatives of the highest aristocracy: sheikhs, oil magnates, members of royal families. Reaching Dr. Al-Zarqawi proved difficult. The dentist was known for his extreme caution regarding patient confidentiality. Detective Connolly had to contact the State Department, which through the Dubai consulate organized an official request. Negotiations lasted almost a week. Dr. Al-Zarqawi categorically refused to provide patient information, citing medical confidentiality. Only after intervention by high-ranking diplomats and guarantees that the information would be used solely to save a life did he agree to help. The response came through diplomatic mail in a sealed envelope. Detective Connolly opened it with trembling hands. Medical records, photographs, and a brief report revealed a horrifying truth. Amina Hassan al-Rashid, née Hassan, 39 years old, wife of Sheikh Osman al-Rashid, one of the most influential men in the United Arab Emirates. The dental reconstruction had been performed 3 years ago, after a jaw injury sustained in a fall downstairs. Attached to the report were photographs from various social events. A woman in luxurious dresses, adorned with jewels, next to a man in traditional Arab clothing. In the background, luxurious palaces, expensive cars, crowds of servants. But most striking were the woman's eyes in these photographs. Beautiful, but absolutely empty, as if the soul had left the beautiful shell, leaving only a lifeless doll. Detective Connolly decided to dig deeper into the woman's background. The surname Hassan was quite common among Arab American families, but intuition suggested there was a local connection. The computer database yielded a startling result. Hassan, one of Michigan's most influential and wealthy families, the construction empire created by patriarch Ibrahim Hassan, included dozens of enterprises throughout the state. The family was deeply integrated into American society, actively participating in charity and political life. And Amina Hassan was Ibrahim's granddaughter, who had disappeared from the family 13 years ago after a scandalous marriage to an Arab sheikh against her relatives' wishes. Old newspaper clippings told the story of family conflict. The young, educated woman with an MBA had met a charismatic sheikh at a business conference and fallen in love. The family was categorically against this union, warning about cultural differences and possible problems. But Amina didn't listen and left for Dubai. After the wedding, contact with the family was virtually severed. Only occasionally did short letters and photographs arrive, in which Amina looked increasingly detached and unhappy. Detective Connolly dialed the Hassan family mansion with a sinking heart. An elderly man with a strong Arabic accent answered. When she mentioned Amina's name, dead silence fell over the phone. Then came sobs. The old man was crying. Ibrahim Hassan, despite his 80 years, was at the hospital within an hour. He was accompanied by his wife Mariam, a fragile woman with kind eyes that spoke of years of suffering and hope. The meeting with their granddaughter shocked the elderly couple. Amina lay turned toward the window and didn't even notice their arrival. When she turned her head, Ibrahim stopped dead in his tracks. Before him was his beloved granddaughter, but there was no trace of recognition in her eyes. He saw what the detective had noticed: signs of long suffering in tired eyes, the hunched shoulders of someone who had learned to be invisible, the careful movements of one who was used to calculating every step. Amina looked at her grandfather and grandmother without the slightest recognition, but something in her consciousness stirred. Familiar voice intonations, native accent, the scent of grandmother's perfume. All this awakened some deep memories. Ibrahim and Mariam sat by their granddaughter's bed until late at night, telling her about the past, about a happy childhood in the big house in Grosse Pointe, about brilliant studies at university, about plans to build a career in the family business, and about that fateful day when 26-year-old Amina met Sheikh Osman al-Rashid at an international business conference in New York. Osman was the embodiment of a dream. Handsome, educated, speaking perfect English. He seemed like a modern Arab leader who combined Eastern wisdom with Western views on gender equality. But grandfather Ibrahim, a man with sharp intuition, sensed deception. He personally met with Osman and returned gloomier than a storm cloud. Behind the beautiful words about love and equality, the old man saw a man of archaic views for whom a woman was merely beautiful property. Osman already had 3 wives and 5 children, including 2 sons. Amina was to become the 4th wife, a beautiful addition to his collection. And Layla, their future daughter, would be just one of many children, a useful tool for arranging profitable marriages and business alliances. The family begged Amina not to rush into marriage, to get to know her fiancé better, to travel to Dubai and see with her own eyes how women lived there. But the infatuated girl wouldn't listen to anything. The wedding took place in Dubai with incredible luxury. Amina looked like a princess from a fairy tale. But within a few months, her letters home became shorter and more formal, and photographs showed a woman with increasingly lifeless eyes. As grandfather and grandmother told about the past, fragments of memories began to surface in Amina's consciousness. First pleasant ones: the smell of grandmother's pies, laughter at family holidays, pride in grandfather's eyes when she defended her thesis. Then darker ones: the first months in Dubai, when Osman's European suits were replaced by traditional clothing and promises of equality by strict rules of seclusion. Her confiscated passport, the prohibition against working, meeting friends, leaving the house without escort. Reality proved more complex than a simple nightmare. Osman al-Rashid was a completely different person at home. European suits gave way to traditional clothing, English to Arabic, and promises of equality to strict rules of confinement. Amina was forbidden to work, meet friends, or leave the house without escort. Her passport was confiscated for security. Contact with family in America was strictly controlled and gradually reduced to a minimum. Osman wasn't a cruel tyrant in the usual sense. He could be generous and even tender when Amina behaved according to his ideas of a submissive wife. expensive gifts, trips to Europe, luxurious living. All this existed when she didn't contradict him. But any display of willfulness, any attempt to regain independence was met with harsh punishment. Blows always fell on the body, bruises on shoulders, ribs, back, where no one would see them. The family's reputation had to remain impeccable. Amina was the fourth wife, the youngest and least important. The senior wives had their sons, heirs to the empire. Amina had given birth only to a daughter, which made her position even more precarious. The single joy in Amina's life was her daughter, Layla, born in the second year of marriage. The girl grew up smart and lively, inheriting American directness from her mother and Arab beauty from her father. But even motherhood didn't protect Amina from her husband's growing cruelty. Osman blamed her for not bearing a son, for insufficient respect for traditions, for American licentiousness. The beatings became more frequent and severe. The nightmare reached its peak on Layla's 12th birthday. At the festive dinner, Osman announced that he had already arranged his daughter's engagement to a 60-year-old business partner from Saudi Arabia. Khalid Asaba was known for his cruelty even by conservative society standards. His previous wives had died in accidents, but he had connections and money that made him untouchable. For Osman, this was a way to conclude a profitable oil deal. His daughter was merely part of the contract. Amina begged her husband to reconsider the decision, reminded him of modern laws, that Layla was still a child. In response, Osman beat her so brutally that she couldn't get out of bed for a week. It was then that Amina understood. If she didn't act immediately, she would lose her daughter forever. In her native America, Layla could get an education, become whatever she wanted, choose a man she loved. In the UAE, she awaited the fate of voiceless property. Months of preparation required incredible caution. Amina understood she would have only one attempt, and failure meant death for both her and her daughter. She started with money, years of saving from household expenses, selling gift jewelry through trusted people. Amina accumulated a significant sum. The money was transferred to an account opened in the name of cousin Fatima in Detroit. Fatima Hassan was the only American relative who maintained contact with Amina. Officially, she was a housewife, but in reality, an activist for an organization helping Muslim women who suffered from domestic violence. The plan was simple and desperate. During a school trip to the shopping center, Amina bribed a guard to get distracted. Layla, forewarned by her mother, exited through the service entrance where a car with a Pakistani driver waited. He had agreed for a large sum to take the girl to the airport. Layla had documents for a flight to America. Amina had arranged them under the guise of a trip to see a doctor in London. In Detroit, the girl was met by Aunt Fatima, who immediately contacted lawyers for temporary custody arrangements. Amina herself flew out on the next flight via a different route, through London and New York. In the plane, she couldn't close her eyes, praying that Layla had safely reached Aunt Fatima. At O'Hare Airport, they were met by a thin old woman with kind eyes. Aunt Fatima cried, embracing the girl she had only seen in photographs. The plan was simple. Take Layla to a safe place, while Amina herself would go to her parents to ask forgiveness and help. The Hassan family had influence and connections that could protect them from Osman's revenge. But something went wrong. Perhaps Osman discovered the escape earlier than Amina had calculated. Perhaps he had people at the airport who spotted their arrival. When the rental car approached the Hassan family mansion in Grosse Pointe, Amina saw in the rearview mirror what made her blood freeze. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows were following her. Osman's people were already here. They were waiting. Amina sharply turned the car around and hit the gas. In the rearview mirror, the black cars lunged into pursuit. The road wound between hills, covered with oaks and maples. Here she had learned to drive as a teenager. Here she had walked with friends. Here she had dreamed of the future. Now these familiar roads could become her last journey. The speedometer showed 90 miles per hour. The rental car shuddered at every turn, but Amina didn't slow down. Behind her, the engines of her pursuers roared. At that moment, her thoughts weren't about her own life. The main thing, Layla was safe. Aunt Fatima would take her far away, give her a new name, hide her in the system, helping abused women. Her daughter would grow up a free American, get an education, choose a husband for love. This was worth any price. The first shot shattered the rear window. The second punctured the rear tire. The car skidded, and Amina desperately fought with the steering wheel, trying to keep the vehicle on the road. A huge oak on the roadside approached with the inevitability of fate. In the last second before impact, Amina whispered a prayer for her daughter, for Aunt Fatima, for all women who had not yet found freedom. The impact was monstrous. Metal crumpled, glass scattered, the world turned upside down. And then, silence. 3 days later, the woman awakened in a hospital room, with pain in her head and emptiness where her memories should have been. But somewhere deep in her subconscious, something whispered that the most important thing had been accomplished. Someone was safe. Someone was free. As memory gradually returned in painful waves, each new fragment fit into the overall picture. Amina remembered that night when she realized if she didn't act immediately, she would lose her daughter forever. The escape plan had matured over months. Money accumulated bit by bit from household expenses. Jewelry secretly sold through trusted people. Fake documents bought from a corrupt official. And most importantly, contact with Aunt Fatima in Detroit. Amina's cousin was the only American relative who maintained contact. Officially, she worked as a school teacher, but secretly helped Muslim women who suffered from domestic violence. Fatima agreed to help despite the risk. She understood that a child's life was at stake. The escape was planned for the day of Layla's school trip. Amina bribed a shopping center guard to get distracted at the right moment. The girl, forewarned by her mother, exited through the service entrance where a car with a Filipino driver waited. Layla had documents for a flight to America, arranged under the guise of a trip to see a doctor in London. In Detroit, she was to be met by Aunt Fatima. Now, lying in the hospital bed, Amina remembered every second of that terrible day. Dubai Airport, where she saw off her daughter, tears of parting, the promise that they would soon see each other in America. At O'Hara Airport, they were met by Aunt Fatima, a small, fragile woman with kind eyes. The plan was simple: to take Layla to safety while Amina went to her parents to ask forgiveness and help. But when her rental car approached the family mansion in Grosse Pointe, Amina saw the black SUVs in her rearview mirror. Osman's people had found her faster than she'd calculated. The car chase ended with the crash that brought her here. But the most important thing, Layla was safe. That thought sustained her through the darkest moments of amnesia. As memories returned, Amina felt not fear, but relief. Her sacrifice had meaning. Her daughter was free. Detective Connolly noticed the change in her patient. When memory returned, the woman's eyes filled not with horror, but with quiet strength. She asked only one question: where was Layla? Contact with Aunt Fatima confirmed everyone's hopes. Layla was safe, living in Detroit under her great-aunt's care and attending local school. The girl had cried for days, certain her mother was dead. The reunion of mother and daughter happened in a strictly guarded hospital room. 12-year-old Layla, matured during the days of separation, cautiously entered the room, afraid to believe her mother was really alive. When Layla saw her mother, she rushed to the bed and sobbed with relief. Amina hugged her daughter, feeling something break in her chest from overwhelming happiness. The girl told how Aunt Fatima had cared for her like her own grandmother. She had attended American school, for the first time in her life, freely communicating with peers, dreaming of becoming a doctor. In just a few days in America, Layla understood what her life could be like without her father's despotism. Grandfather Ibrahim and grandmother Maryam met their great-granddaughter with tears in their eyes. Layla was a living embodiment of their hopes, a smart, beautiful, vibrant girl who could become a worthy heir to family traditions. The old man swore he would do everything possible to protect his granddaughter and great-granddaughter from Osman's revenge. The Hassan family had significant influence in American society. Political connections accumulated over decades, business partnerships, friendships with influential people. The best lawyers in the country were hired. The process of applying for political asylum for Amina began. Medical documents confirming systematic physical abuse became key evidence. But the main testimony came from Layla herself. The girl told the lawyers about her father's plans to marry her off at 12 to a cruel old man. Her testimony shocked even experienced attorneys. The story of a woman who risked her life to save her daughter from forced marriage resonated in Americans' hearts. But the Hassan family asked for minimal publicity. They understood that any publicity could endanger Amina and Layla's safety. Osman al-Rashid wasn't going to give up. Through his lawyers, he demanded his wife's extradition, accusing her of child kidnapping. He threatened diplomatic scandals, economic sanctions, severing oil contracts. The Hassan family mansion began receiving anonymous threatening letters. Unknown people watched the house. Cars with tinted windows circled the neighborhood. Grandfather Ibrahim hired private security and contacted the FBI. Federal agents took the family under protection. Understanding the case could have international consequences. The political pressure was enormous. Dubai was an important U.S. ally in the region, and Osman was an influential businessman with extensive connections. Some officials hinted it would be easier to return the runaway wife than create a diplomatic crisis. But American society stood up for Amina and Layla. Women's organizations, human rights activists, religious leaders, all demanded they be granted asylum. America showed itself as a country that protects the weak and gives second chances to those who need them. The court decision was handed down on a cold December morning. Amina sat between her lawyers, holding her daughter's hand. Layla looked older than her 12 years. Months of uncertainty and fear had turned the child into a serious girl with sad eyes. The judge, an elderly woman with a stern face and kind eyes, studied the documents for a long time. Finally, she raised her head and spoke words that changed their lives forever. Political asylum was granted. Amina and Layla received the right to remain in America under state protection. Osman was denied his wife and daughter's extradition. Moreover, he was banned from entering the country. The courtroom filled with quiet tears of relief. Amina cried, not believing the nightmare was finally over. Layla hugged her mother, whispering words of gratitude to the country that had given them a second chance. Grandfather Ibrahim, despite his 80 years, stood and pronounced an ancient Arabic prayer of thanksgiving. America had justified their trust. Here truly could find protection those who needed it. But Osman wasn't going to give up. Unable to act officially, he hired private detectives and people willing to track down the fugitive family for money. The FBI took the investigation under personal control. It became clear that the Hassan family faced a serious international threat, but American authorities were determined to protect their citizens. After lengthy negotiations with federal authorities, a decision was made to completely change identities for Amina and Layla. This was the only way to guarantee their safety from possible revenge attempts. Amina Hassan al-Rashid officially died. In her place came Anna Wilson, a teacher's widow from Oregon with a teenage daughter, Lila. New documents, new history, new home in a quiet town on the West Coast. The move was painful. They had to leave grandfather, grandmother, all the relatives who had just returned to their lives. But safety was more important than sentiments. Layla, now Leela, adapted to the new life amazingly quickly. At 14, she entered the local high school where she was accepted as an ordinary American girl. No one suspected her past. Amina, Anna, began working at the local library. Quiet, peaceful work among books helped her heal from psychological trauma. Gradually, she began leading support groups for women who had experienced domestic violence. But the main work of her life, Anna considered helping other women in similar situations. She secretly financed a network of shelters for domestic violence victims, using money that grandfather Ibrahim regularly sent through complex financial schemes. The organization worked in strictest secrecy. Anna understood that any publicity could reveal her location, but she couldn't stay aside, knowing how many women needed help. Psychological rehabilitation took years. Anna regularly saw a therapist, learning to cope with anxiety attacks and nightmares. The most difficult thing was overcoming distrust of people. Years of control and violence had taught her to constantly look over her shoulder. Lila developed like a normal American girl. She was interested in music, participated in school plays, made friends with peers. When classmates asked about her past, she said she was born in Europe and then moved with her mother to America after her father's death. Mother and daughter became incredibly close. They were united not only by shared traumatic experience, but by gratitude to the country that gave them a second chance. They often spent evenings dreaming about the future in this beautiful, free land. Lila dreamed of becoming a doctor, perhaps a psychologist to help traumatized children. Anna supported any of her daughter's ambitions, knowing that in America the girl could become whatever she wanted. Here, there were no limits to women's dreams. The veneers remained the only reminder of her past life. Anna could have replaced them, but decided to keep them. They became for her a symbol not of luxury and coercion, but of salvation and new opportunities that America had given her. 3 years after the trial, Anna received a letter transmitted through a complex chain of intermediaries. Grandfather Ibrahim wrote that Osman had died in prison of a heart attack. His empire had crumbled. Children scattered to different countries. Anna thought long about this news. Strangely, she felt neither relief nor joy, only emptiness where hatred once was. She understood she had forgiven him not because he deserved forgiveness, but because she deserved peace in her soul. America had taught her not only freedom, but the ability to let go of the past. Grandfather Ibrahim died at 85 in Detroit, surrounded by loving family. His last will was transmitted to Anna through lawyers. He left her a significant part of his fortune, with a request to continue helping women in need. The funeral became an event for the entire Arab American community of Michigan. Hundreds of people came to pay tribute to a man who had fought for justice all his life. Anna couldn't attend the funeral. It was too dangerous, but she secretly visited grandfather's grave several months later, bringing flowers and words of gratitude for never stopping believing in her. Lila, who turned 18, entered the University of Oregon's psychology department. She planned to specialize in working with traumatized children, especially from immigrant families. America had given her education and opportunities she couldn't have dreamed of in Dubai. On her 30th birthday, Anna met a person who changed her view of relationships. Dr. Thomas Miller, a family physician at the local clinic, was the complete opposite of everything she knew about men. Gentle, patient, with kind eyes behind glasses, he never raised his voice, never made decisions for others, always asked permission before doing anything. Thomas volunteered at the Women's Help Center where they met. Their relationship developed slowly, with many setbacks and doubts. Anna often woke up in panic, afraid she was trapped again, but Thomas each time patiently helped her return to reality, never insisting, always giving her time. Leela approved of her mother's choice. She liked how Thomas treated Anna, with tenderness and deep respect. He never tried to replace her father, simply became a kind friend to the family. Anna and Thomas's wedding was a modest ceremony in their home's garden. The bride wore a simple white dress, without luxury and extravagance. Her happy smile and peace in her eyes were the main decorations. Leela was the witness. The 20-year-old student had become a beautiful, confident young woman. She gave a toast in which she thanked her mother for courage and America for the opportunity to start a new life. Only the closest friends attended the wedding. Thomas's colleagues, neighbors, several women from the support group who had become Anna's new family. The veneers that once led to uncovering Anna's story sparkled brilliantly in her smile. Now they symbolized not the horror of the past, but the joy of the present and hopes for the future in the country that had given them a second chance. 15 years later, Dr. Lila Miller worked at Portland Children's Hospital, specializing in rehabilitating traumatized children. She had written several books about helping immigrant children and was recognized as one of the leading specialists in her field. Beside her, her husband David, a lawyer who defends refugee rights, and 2 children, 7-year-old Ibrahim, named after his great-great-grandfather, and 5-year-old Sophia. Anna Miller, at 54, headed the largest network of women's help centers on the West Coast. Over the years, thousands of women had passed through her programs, many of whom found freedom and new life. She never publicly told her story. Safety remained a priority. But every woman saved was a personal victory over the past. Thomas became not only a loving husband, but a partner in the fight for human rights. Their marriage was based on mutual respect, trust, and shared values, everything Anna thought she could never have. In the family album, next to photos of the wedding, birthdays, and school graduations, lay one special photograph, the very one where Detective Sarah Connolly first showed Anna her past. The woman in the gold dress with empty eyes now seemed like a stranger. The veneers were still perfect, but now they illuminated not a golden cage, but a world of limitless American possibilities. Every day, Anna woke up with gratitude to the country that had accepted her and her daughter, protected them, given them a chance to become who they wanted to be. On weekends, the family often went to the ocean. Standing on the shore, Anna looked at the endless waters and thought about the long journey that had brought her here. From a girl from Detroit who fell in love with the wrong man, to a woman who found herself in service to others. Leela often took the children to the ocean and told them about how their grandmother was a very brave woman who traveled a long way so they could live in a free country. The children listened to these stories like fairy tales, not yet understanding the price their American dream had cost. Sometimes, Anna received news about the world she had left behind. Osman had long been dead. His empire crumbled. Other wives scattered around the world. But somewhere there were still women in golden cages, dreaming of freedom. For them, Anna continued to work, expanding the help network, lobbying new laws, training social workers. She knew she couldn't save everyone, but every saved life was priceless. The story of Amina Hassan al-Rashid ended in a hospital room in Michigan when a woman without memory awakened under the American sky. Anna Miller's story continued every day, filled with love, work, and gratitude to the country that had given her a second chance. In a distant room of an American hospital, a woman once awakened without memory, without documents, without a past. But she had perfect veneers, and this became the beginning of her path to freedom that America had given her. Every smile tells a story. This story told that in America, everything is possible, even starting life anew.